Hello. How about now? Wow, I'm really off my game. Okay. Well, let's start that again. Today is tax day. A day that I mourn the loss of, individual freedom and rights, and it's a very sad thing. So, I thought I would do this little bonus episode / live stream in honor of that. If you guys have questions you want to put in the chat, this is the episode to do it. I'm going to be talking about some fun libertarian theories and ideas that, I've thought about a lot over the last couple of years, the last year or so, and give my opinion on that. Things that, I think there are things that are very cut and dry about libertarianism, right? Like the non-aggression principle, taxation is theft, hierarchies, etc. But then there's some things it gets a little muddied, right? And, you throw religion to it at times, and, it causes a lot of debate. It's like one of my favorite memes of all time. It's like libertarian Twitter, where it's like a picture of like a guy in a chair, and there's like three animals like and they're all attacking each other. And it's like libertarian. Like that's how this shit is. But I personally I don't consider myself a libertarian. I'm just a strict anarcho-capitalist. I guess I'm registered as one technically, but I don't vote, so whatever. But that is one of the things that I have always loved about the Libertarian Party is there is a variety of thought, there is a variety of ideas, and that's human. That's what human people I think even amongst Republicans and Democrats, if people were to be honest with each other and honest with themselves, there probably would be a lot some differentiation of ideas as opposed to what the party preaches. But I think there's a lot more conformity in those parties. I mean, especially the Democratic Party. I think probably the Democratic Party more than the Republicans, to be honest. But, I mean, there's plenty in that, too. For Muggsy, how do you feel about MTG pushing the you don't actually have to pay income tax thing? I don't really know anything about that, to be honest. I could look it up. I guess I'm not a fan of income taxes at all. I think it's stupid and crazy. I guess not even. That's one of the most disappointing things about Trump is that was his big pitch. I'm going to get rid of the income tax. That hasn't fucking happened. Of course he's started war in Iran, but hasn't done the most basic thing. But guys, he's going to drain the swamp. Just wait. He's playing 12D chess. Okay. Income tax. Maybe there's a clip. There is a clip.
Your country.
Well, let's.
Your country and.
Let's react to it. This is Marguerite Taylor Greene. Is this
your country?
This is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Maybe I just don't know what she looks like, but.
And fellow countrymen need you to obey the law. Stop paying federal income tax. Take a listen and join the tribe.
You were a former IRS agent, not paying your own taxes. They came after you and tried to put you.
I was going to say, that chick looks way hotter than Marjorie Taylor Greene does.
In prison for helping someone else, really. And
helping them obey the law.
Helping them obey the law and do what you were doing, which was really the greatest threat to them, is helping others obey the law and not pay their income taxes. And then you were acquitted. And have you paid taxes ever since?
Oh, no.
No, you're still not paying your income taxes.
No, but it's not civil disobedience. It's learning the truth, learning the facts.
This is so fascinating to me. This is what, so I, along with most Americans, didn't know that you just didn't have to pay your income tax.
Well,
federal income taxes.
Yeah, the IRS, it's had 80 years or more, 100 years really, but decades to create this spider web that can ensnare people. And
well, we're not the only ones that think paying income taxes is wrong. President Trump agrees that that we shouldn't be paying taxes.
I was just reviewing a statement that he made.
What did he say about it?
This was January of 2005. President Trump said, quote, "It's time for the United States to return to the system that made us richer and more powerful than ever before. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign nations, we should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens," unquote. That was January 2025.
I believe it was April 2nd of...
That doesn't mean that he wants to get rid of the income tax. Look, if you're a government official, you're going to do both, right? You're going to be like anyone else. You're going to get as much money as possible. I think that's stupid to think that that's a binary just because he said, "Oh, well, that's not what he said, dude."
2025, just a year ago, was Liberation Day, where President Trump brought in and enacted all the tariffs. To start what he was just talking about, there is President Trump's vision is for tariffs to replace income taxes, but yet President Trump is solely focused on fighting a war in the Middle East right now.
There's still time, right? He's still the commander-in-chief. He's
Okay, that's enough of that. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't agree with income tax. I think I don't think Trump is actually interested in doing anything about that, because he would have by now. I can imagine. Look, I can imagine that is probably a more difficult thing to do when you're in that position of power than what Trump would, lead anyone to believe. But the problem is, this is the government's bread and butter, right? That's like if you're Walmart and you're like, "Hey, we're not going to charge people for groceries." That would be insane. My damn cat. It's always my damn cat fucking everything up. I did my last podcast. I had to stop in the middle of my podcast and go feed them, these fat fucks, and it ruined my I had to edit it and upload it. Yeah, I'm talking shit. Deal with it. I might have to, dude. No, I might have to pause it. Okay, we're gonna pause it. We'll be right back. Okay. But yeah, I mean, the episode's called Tax Day, so you know I don't like taxes. Okay. So the first thing I thought I would talk about that I thought would be fun, and like I said, if you guys have questions or want to comment on rebuttals or whatever to what I'm saying, feel free to do that. This is the stream for that. I want to talk about the idea of a donut homestead, which I had not heard until probably within the last 6 months. I didn't even know this thing existed. But it's an interesting theory. So, and anybody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, a donut homestead is you have so if you look at do you recommend not filing in protest? Yeah, that was part that I wanted to. That was part that I wanted to do. Look, I mean, I think it's one of those things that it's interesting, right? In this day and age, if everyone just decided not to pay taxes, how much could the government really do? I think there is a point where there's an exercise in power, right? However, I think the problem with that then is like, will they just find another way to essentially tax us? Like, will they just, like, you know, raise the tax on, like, products or groceries or whatever, as opposed to, like, directly taxing us? Like, that's something that they could do. Also, you kind of have to remember at the end of the day, like, they do ultimately have the power. And especially in the day and age of the digital world where, I mean, I file my taxes through TurboTax. Millions of other people do the same. So I don't know how realistic it is to say, like, we're not going to pay taxes. Now, I mean, and it's a great idea. You know, I think if enough people are on board, I might do it. But I mean, I don't know. I think of it like, if you are on a block and the mob's controlling your block, and the mob comes around and they want their kickback or whatever, like, that's wrong. But at the same time, like, your life is more valuable than that. So you're a lot better off just giving them their kickback than risking getting shot. Now, I mean, if you want to take that stance, that's on you. Fine. I congratulate that. But, like, I don't necessarily know if that's worth it. I mean, I guess at some point you have to draw a line in the sand, but I don't know. Do I agree with it? Like, I don't disagree with it. Do I think it would work? Probably not. Okay, anyways, the donut homestead. So it's this idea where you have a piece of property that is essentially a donut. You have one piece in the middle that's a piece of property, and then you have a circumference around it. So like the donut is a piece of property, and then the donut hole is also a piece of property. Now, the donut homestead theory goes something along the lines of, does the middle hole of the donut actually own that piece of property, or is it in essence owned by the people who own the donut part, because they are surrounding it? And it's you know, I could see, like, in a medieval time sense how that would maybe be more relevant. Like, if you are, Jesus, my hair's all over the place here. If you are someone who, you know, is in that situation, like, let's say, like, even like the old times where before, like, you know, technology and helicopters or whatever, you know. I guess you could say that it might be easier. It might be easier for there to be some kind of resistance to, like, let's say you leave your property or need like products or something for your property. It's gonna be more difficult than, you know, the other way around, right? However, I think something to think about, you know, it's like kind of like the cannabis thing, right? In essence, look, I mean, when it comes to cannabis, Iowa is actually a very good example of this, where every state around Iowa, I mean, I think almost every state, majority of the states have cannabis legalized. And, you know, the states do everything they can to put as many dispensaries on the border of Iowa as on the border right up to Iowa as possible, for the simple reason that there's a vested interest in them to sell that to those people who do not have access to that. And I think you would find a very similar thing happen in a donut homestead. Like, let's say the donut part had businesses, or was a business, and the people in the middle were potential buyers. Like, it would be more advantageous to you to cooperate with that middle part versus just saying, fuck you, we're not gonna sell to you, we're just gonna take over your land, right? Like, I think this comes down to really the reason why people tend to, and I argue this a lot with, like, religious people, like, why people tend to act more morally than immorally, because it is advantageous to them. Like, someone who treats people well, treats people with respect, mutually cooperates with other people, they're going to have more, wealth and success than someone who just takes shortcuts and tries to do the quick, easy thing that, like, just look through history. Like, none of these dictators or, murderers or awful people, like, none of them had lifetime success. They all, I don't believe in karma in like a spiritual sense, but I do think on some level there is karma. Like, if you output a lot of negativity into the world through your actions, or honestly even just your rhetoric, like, that's going to come back on you in some fashion. For the, like, even like a business front, like if you want to go to other businesses, but you just go in and steal, or like you go in and you trash all the businesses, like in a free market, like nobody would sell to you. They'd be like, fuck you. Not cooperating with the donut hole is a good way to push them out if you want that parcel. Sure. But again, I think you're going to the same point that I'm making, which is it's just going to be more advantageous to cooperate for you in the long term. And there are people who like don't have the capacity to do that. Like, there are people who just, they only have the capacity to think in the short term and think like, oh, if I rob this person, I'm going to get $200 now, and not if I don't rob people and I just keep working and keep trying to do the good thing, like I will have more wealth and more value than that. So, I think that's how that's going to be the default. Also, I think in the day and age of technology and, social media, and, and for the whole business front, like that goes through like passage as well, right? Like, I have a hard time believing that the donut part would not cooperate with the middle part in terms of like passage or whatever. And, in the day and age of like technology, and like you could get a helicopter, like, if you wanted to travel somewhere, just get a helicopter, right? Like, like there's maneuvers around that. So I think it's an interesting debate, but no, I don't agree with the idea that a donut homestead is like, the donut automatically owns the middle part. Like, I just don't think that's a thing. Or I don't think that's a likely outcome, I should say. But who knows? People do malicious things. I'm sure if there was an experiment where there were multiple different donut homesteads, that would happen to some degree, but I think a majority of the time it's going to be cooperative, because that's in everybody's interest. Best interest, I should say. Okay. Let's talk about restaurant slavery. Now, this is a topic I'm very heated about. Probably abnormally heated about. Probably something that I don't need to be this heated about, but I am. Because it roused me. So I was in in this Discord, the Part of the Problem Discord, which I know some people who are watching are part of. There's famously been this debate between me and a couple other people in the Discord about the idea of restaurant slavery. And what this came from was, calling out religion in a sense and saying like, hey, like, Christianity bolstered slavery, and like God condoned slavery, even instructs people how to have slaves. And somebody, they made the claim that it was like, well, the reason people were enslaved was to pay off their debts. And I kind of was like, I'm just like, that's crazy and abhorrent. Like, in any like modern day setting, I feel like that would be awful, right? Wrong. But the scenario that was played out, I don't remember if it was me or someone else that me or someone else who brought this up. It's like, if you go into a restaurant, they serve you with the expectation that you're going to pay at the end. You eat your food. It's a sit-down restaurant. And you don't pay. That then the owner of the restaurant has a moral right to take you at gunpoint or in other words, force you against your will to go to the back and wash dishes in order to make up for the pay for your meal. Now, it's actually really funny. I saw this like a month ago. I saw this movie clip where this exact same thing played out, where this guy went into a diner, ate the food because he was starving, and the lady was like talking to him about his life, and he was like honest. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I just haven't eaten in a couple days and I really need some food. And she looks back and they're like talking, she's like, is there anything you can do? And she looks back and sees the single dishwasher back there like struggling and yelling and all that, and she just turns back to him and says, can you do the dishes? And I was like, oh my god, this is there's some things that like come up in your feed that's like, someone's listening to me, man. Like, someone knows that like this is gonna fucking get me. It's pretty hilarious. And it cut at that point, so I don't actually know what the context was of, like, you know, did he if I were to guess, I would assume that he went and did some dishes, right? But the difference between that scenario and the scenario that I'm talking about is there's some volunteerism, right? Like, you know, got a meal that you couldn't pay for. And I think most people in that situation would genuinely feel bad about it. Like, they would be like in a situation where like they are truly desperate. It's like the reason like why, like, you know, starving people steal, right? Like, that's morally wrong, but there is this like animal thing where it's like, I need to feed myself. Or like family members, or like, I need to have that, even if I don't have any means possible for that. But there's something voluntary about that, right? It's like, okay, like, I feel bad for not doing this, so I'm going to, you know, offer my services up to pay for it, because like, morally, this doesn't sit right with me. And I think most of the time, just like with the Donut Homestead thing, like, people are going to do the right thing. I think if I was in that situation, I would maybe do the same thing. Like, hey, is there anything I could do in order to make up for the fact that I could not give you capital for this meal? However, that is not the situation that I am painting, which is that you are forcing someone into that scenario. Now, I think a big part of this argument is the idea that like there's a certain amount of capital attached to the meal, and then there's a certain amount of capital that's attached to the hours that you work or the service that you do for doing dishes, right? The problem is that none of this is a one-to-one. It's all subjective. You know, if I owned a grocery store, I could, you know, there's a certain cost of the apple, right? And then there's like a certain cost that I set to sell the apple. And there's probably things factored in that. Like, you know, the amount of money that I need to be able to pay my employees and keep the place afloat and pay for water and electricity and all that. Like, all that could be factored into the new price that I give for the apple when I sell it. However, it is not a given that I am going to sell my apple based on that. You know, I could buy an apple from a manufacturer for $1.50 a pop, and I could charge them $2 a pop. But what's to stop me from charging them $4 a pop? Now, obviously, there's, you know, I think in the free market, you would kind of just naturally find like, oh, hey, I can't, like, nobody's going to buy my apple for $4, so I'm going to bring it down to $2 or $2.50 or whatever, right? Like, sure, that happens, but in a one-to-one exchange, there's no like real barrier there. There's no real constraint there. So like, and you know, this kind of goes back to like the idea of, and I think this kind of plays into it a little bit too, like the idea of like justice. Excuse me, which is like, I quote Dave Smith. It's just a fancy word for revenge at the end of the day. And like, okay, like let's say someone shoots a family member of mine. Someone shoots my dog. Makes me very sad, very upset. And I think in my mind, okay, well, since this happened to me, I'm going to go shoot their dog and kill their dog. Now, although that may feel emotionally satisfying, there's no real, how do I phrase this? There's no real mechanism to like equate that. Like, me killing that dog is not going to bring my dog back. My dog's dead no matter what. No matter if I leave it alone, no matter if I go out in the world and kill 50 dogs. Like, my dog is still dead. And I think similarly to the restaurant slavery scenario, when you give somebody a meal, and we'll get to that in a second. When you give somebody their meal, that meal's gone. Now, you can set a charge for the capital, but it's a lot different than like if someone steals $20 from me and I use the minimal amount of force possible to steal back that $20. That is a one-to-one exchange, because that's capital. It's not digested. It's not like gone like a life, right? Like it's still there. The value is still there. That's what's so great about capital. But is not the same as you give somebody a meal at a price that you've arbitrarily set. Essentially, you can argue like, oh, there's a certain price differentiation to this, but there's no outside mechanism that's ensuring that you are just going to sell at that price. Same like what I just said with the Apple example. And then there's arbitrariness in like what you pay your employees. You could underpay your employees. You could pay your employees way more than what the task is worth because you respect them, right? Like if you have an employee that just starts out, they might make $7.25. If they're there for a couple years, they might make $12. So I mean, my point with that is like you are setting the standard. So you being the owner, the person who is holding the gun to the person that you decide to give a meal without taking capital first, that's on you. I don't care what social standard or mechanism there is for saying like, oh, hey, if you come in and you get a meal that you say you're going to pay for and then you can't pay for, that I have no blame for that. It's like, I hate to quote him, but there's like this Ben Shapiro analogy that I actually really liked, where he says, like, if you go down an alley and you hold up $100 and wave it around and scream, I have $100, and somebody robs you, like, the person that robbed you, there's still fault to that. Like, that person still robbed you, and that's still wrong. However, there's still partial fault on you for being a fucking dumbass and waving around $100. Like, both of those things can be true. And I think in this scenario, it's very similar. And there are business models that combat this. There's drive-through. Like there is an actual market response to the idea that if you have a product that you want to sell, that it's going to make more sense for you to take that product, like to get the money for that product before you give it to them. Like that is how it works in every industry ever, except this sit down dining thing, because it's just this like social construct that like, oh, if I sit down, it's going to be a nice experience. And I just don't give a shit. Like, sorry. What I care about is morals and logic and how things actually play out in the real world. These are the things I care about. So if someone doesn't pay for your meal, somebody's like, hey, like the situation I was just lying out in the movie, like, hey, I can't do this. And your response is, okay, I'm going to force you to do something for me in order to arbitrarily make up for the fact that you took a meal from me. Now, that's not... Look, if you wanted to say maybe have him make you a meal and then bring it back, That's a better argument. That's at least a better argument. But it is not a one-to-one to say you consumed a meal that I'm not going to be able to get back, so therefore I'm going to force you or hold you at gunpoint to go wash dishes in exchange for that. This just is not. This is not a one-to-one. And then once, like in any other scenario, like let's say you want like a sex slave, and so you go to a woman and you point her at gunpoint and you say, "Hey, you are now my slave. I now have power over you." It's in my mind is the same thing. It is the same thing. The only difference is justification, and it's an emotional one at best. And once you are the person in power, once you are the person that is exerting power over this individual who has done this, who has taken money from you, not money, taken food from you, it's really on you to determine when that they have done that. And you're relying on that person, the person who's holding the gun, you're relying on them to be fair in that. And if you're willing to agree to that, like if you're willing to concede that, like, yeah, that's fair, then why aren't you pro-government? Because that's the exact same thing. That's like the entire purpose of the court system is we're going to make this fair. We're going to have justice. So if you consider yourself like an anarchist or an anarcho-capitalist, but you agree with that model, then you're a hypocrite. End of story. There's no mechanism in place for me to say, okay, well, I'm holding you at gunpoint to do dishes to make up for the meal that you couldn't pay for. There's no mechanism for that to be an hour, for that to be a day, for that to be a year, because you have the power. You are the one holding the guns. Once you have committed the act of holding them to gunpoint, it's game over. You are now empowering, you now have power over another person, which is the exact same idea of indentured servitude in biblical times. It was all arbitrary. It was the idea of, oh, this person can't pay me or did something or whatever, and now I'm going to arbitrarily have what in my mind seems just and moral this time frame in order to make up for that, which has no real constraint, which has no real world expectation or whatever or anything like that. It's simply just what you feel. Same with the dog scenario. Someone shoots my dog, I'm going to go shoot their dog. You shooting another dog is not going to bring you back. You holding somebody at gunpoint and forcing them to do dishes is not going to give you your meal back. That's just how it is. Okay, I'm going to let these dogs out. We will be right back. And I got one more thing I want to discuss. And then if anybody has anything on the stream, you aren't a libtard, are you? I've been called that. I've been called that before. It's really funny. I had 1 year where I got called a woke libtard and Fox News in the same year. I'm like, if you're not getting called both those things in the same year, then you're not doing it right. All right. Actually, no, they're okay. They were freaking out, but they're okay. So we'll just keep going. Okay. And like I said, before we end this, if you guys have anything you want to put in the chat, any questions or whatever, feel free to do so. Okay, last thing I wanted to talk about, like I said, unless anybody has anything else, the power vacuum theory. Now, I think this is the best argument that you can pose against the anarcho-capitalist, anarchist worldview, which is like, what were to happen if you were to completely abolish government? Like, let's say tomorrow or today, tax day. That would be great if they happened on tax day. But let's say today, Donald Trump announced that the federal government has ceased to exist. Kim Reynolds goes on TV, says the government no longer exists, it no longer operates, there will be no police, there'll be no ambulance services, like no water, nothing, which would be an anarcho-capitalist dream. But I think the best argument against this is the power vacuum theory, which is, you can argue about, okay, do these people have these power because of government? I think a lot of times the answer is yes. Even like the rich billionaires, all these leftists like to make the argument that like, oh, they just hoard all this money and they're just greedy and evil. And I think if you look at anything in a free market sense, like the customer has a lot more power. Like let's say like if I charge an apple for $10, nobody is really going to buy that apple. Sure, there might be dumbass elites who would be like, yeah, fuck, I'll pay for $10 for an apple. But a majority of people are not going to pay $10 for that apple. Then you are going to be forced to bring down the price. But when you have middleman of insurance, like in the case of like, the healthcare system, or you just have you have corporations that can get bailed out at any point from the government, it creates this thing that is just not, it's not representative of free market capitalism. So anyways, so these people who are powerful from that system, most likely, if the government ends, they still have all that power. Like if the government ended today, tomorrow Elon Musk is still a very rich and wealthy and powerful man. Jeff Bezos was still a very rich and wealthy, powerful man. Probably, honestly, even the government officials would probably still have some level of power in that free market system. So the question is having at the very least, this is kind of the minarchist view too, like isn't it important to have some kind of government entity, some kind of middle ground entity where it can prevent this from happening? This chat is distracting, man. Roman, you seriously use that term ironically. That's funny. I'm not shading anyone that comes in the chat. I appreciate all of you. But so that's the question. Like, do we need this level of government to prevent that from happening? And you can think this is simplistic, and before that, I'll acknowledge, like, would there be another, type of inequality or, coercive NAP violating power that would come as a result of that? Probably. That's probably something that would happen. Let's look at like healthcare, right? Like if the healthcare system was just completely, like the public healthcare system was just completely abolished today, and tomorrow it's just privatized healthcare, there are people who are not going to get healthcare services. Like that's an undeniable fact. However, I think the people who pose government as being the solution live in fantasy land. Like they live in this area where they think that we need government because government's going to make things equal and government's going to be better for everyone. And that's never the case. It's never has been the case. It never will be the case. It doesn't have the capacity to be the case. Because the fact of the matter is people are human and people are self-interested. And, to an extent that's, as long as there's some cooperation involved and you're not forcing people into things, like that's fine. But when you have an entity like government who uses force, who uses these things, it then becomes unethical. And so what I look at this is I always look at government as a Band-Aid solution. And I think you also have to look at what caused these problems in the first place. It's the same solution that you are posing to solve it is what is essentially. It's like if you have a fire and you're like, what do I do to put out this fire? It's just to add more fire. Now I know there's like the theory where there's situations where that does actually make sense in order to like let it burn through, right? But like if we're just gonna look at this like at face value, or like let's say you have a flood. Let's say you have a flood and you're like, should we build a dam? And they're like, no, we need to add more water. Like it's never makes sense in any practical level. But for some reason, when it comes to government, the solution is more government. And that just never works. Time and time again, it fails. So look, I can acknowledge, like, yes, there's a problem. There's like a immediate problem when it comes to like the power vacuum argument, where if governments alleviated that these powerful people are, but like, what's the solution? What's the solution then? Because it's not going to be this fairy tale solution where we just have a government that like makes things equal, everybody's happy. Like that never fucking happens. Never has happened, never will happen. There's no capacity for that to happen. It will always just perpetuate the problems. And I think, like I said, if it was a true free market world, these things would just play out. And the powerful would eventually, over time, either become less powerful or they would share their power. And it would help everyone. Now, this is obviously theory, right? Like, I don't think we're ever going to live in a time, I could hope, but I don't think we're ever going to live in a time where there's going to be no government. So this is literally just theory at the end of the day. But I do think when, having this anarcho-capitalist viewpoint, this is probably one of the best counters. And it's kind of something where you kind of have to sit and accept the fact that, yeah, things are going to be unequal. Things are going to suck for a lot of people, probably including me. But it's not really about that. It's about what's right. It's about the idea of we're not going to bow to the mob. Because at the end of the day, the government is just the mob. They're just a more powerful mob. That's all they are. I'm catching up on these chats. There's no such thing as a free market. No, if the government does not regulate, then the top players in said market will grab power and control it. Might as well be a democratic one. Not necessarily. That is true that there is no such thing as a free market. That's correct. Like it doesn't exist. As long as government exists, that doesn't exist. And I guess there's like in the old days, like mafias, right? But I think again, this mafias aren't included in this scenario because it's just another power structure. And again, I think this is like going back to what we were talking about earlier with like it's always in everybody's interest to be cooperative. Like, yes, there will always be a small percentage of people who have power and will exert that power in a way that's malicious. But I mean, that comes back on them. And like, I think you have to also keep in mind, like, why do they have the power in the first place? It's because of the same government democratic quote unquote system. And democracy is also bullshit. That's, I think countries like the Nordic countries are way closer to democracy than America is. And, even them, like they have to really give up some of their, self-governing ability. God damn it, honey. You guys suck. You know what my messages say? Don't get 4 animals. Don't get 4 pets. It's a terrible idea. I think a lot of what used to make America great was our ability to borrow the best of the world and make it our own, a melting pot to combine the human race's best aspect into one nation. I agree. I actually 100% agree with that. And, I think that's why these tariffs are such a bad idea. It's like, the only person that the tariffs help is the government. It's just a way for them to tax. Like in a free market, it makes no sense to why wouldn't people can complain about like how China makes their stuff, but like it makes it way cheaper. Like why is I guess you can argue the ethics of it, but then it's like, what's the alternative? That's why I always ask, like, what's the alternative? Like, what? We're just going to have all these products that cost way more money and nobody can afford them? Like, that's a great alternative. Like, okay, man. Like, and look, if you really want to do that, if you want to be like, hey, I'm going to create a market that is, just as cheap as China and doesn't exploit child labor, then fucking do it. But the problem is, like, you just can't in this current, establishment. Like, maybe. Opie. These guys hate you. Why are you trying to come in? We're almost done. That's not the point. Whoever wins in a free market with no government will then control the market and be the new mob. You can't avoid mobs. You can just strive to have a system where you choose. I'm not necessarily saying that you can avoid mobs, but you can make it as best as good as possible. It's far better to have 5 mobs that are not as powerful than one extremely powerful mob. And I think the idea of somebody winning is also misguided. Saying that there's going to be one person that wins in a free market. Why can't multiple people win? Why can't someone who sells someone bread and then gets milk in exchange, that's the whole point of the free market, is that they both win. You choose which mob controls the system. If you choose wisely, you don't get fucked over that badly. We don't get to choose the mob. When has that ever happened? You really think your vote counts? You really think your vote, with however many millions of people vote, 160 million or whatever, 80 million, whatever the number is, you really think your voice matters in that? Okay, this might be the wrong channel for you, buddy. Democracy is bullshit. You don't get to, if you want someone to be the mob ruler or your leader, you don't really get to pick that. If I really like my neighbor Sam, and I'm like, hey, I think you would do a really good job being the president, Sam isn't going to be president. The only people who are going to be president are the people that the mob give us as an option. And they're all bad. What's the statistic? I think it's like every candidate only gives like 25 to 28% of their promises. And if you take that into free, like if I went to Walmart, I had a grocery order, they only gave me 25% of my grocery order. That would be outrageous. That would be literally theft. But when this is political system, we kind of just accept it. If you listen to the fools, the mob rules. I like that. Okay. I think I responded okay to that. Maybe I didn't. But, you can always shoot me a message. The last resort of government is always violence, and I don't think enough citizens understand that concept. Agreed. 100%. And that is the difference. Is like if you as a businessman, like with the restaurant slavery scenario, like if you as a businessman go and arrest someone because they're not giving you the money that you want, then you're just a government at that point. And it's like, it's a lot better to have 10 weaker ones of those than one really powerful one. Nothing's utopia, nothing's perfect, but a free market is a far better system than a governmental or a democratic one. Yes, but what kind of person would rise to power in the kind of system you advocate for? Most likely warmongers. No. I don't believe that. I just don't believe that. I think there are plenty of examples of people who are kind and good, who run businesses and are powerful and all that. I just think that's a generalization. I just disagree with. Okay, guys, we are going to wrap up there. I might come back on later in game, or maybe not. I might go out and smoke a cigar. I'm not sure, but this was a lot of fun. How do you justify that better? Or how do you justify that belief? What do you mean? What belief? It's just a fact. That's just the way the world works. Like, yeah, no, I mean, in a perfect world, there would be no mobs. There would be no powers. Like, there would be no people enslaving people or powerful people taking, being, exerting their power on weaker people in an immoral way, right? Like, but that's reality. You have to contend with that. And to like buy into a system of government is not contending with that.